The bullet pierced the weathered sign as Olivia Newell rode into Presidio, Texas, the shot so close she felt the wind of it ruffle her hair. She yanked hard on her horse's reins, scanning the dusty main street for her assailant. This wasn't the welcome she had expected in 1876, though perhaps she should have known better. "That's far enough, stranger." A man's voice boomed from the direction of the saloon. Olivia kept her expression neutral, though her heart thundered in her chest. After 3 weeks on the trail from St. Louis, she hadn't come this far to be turned away by some trigger-happy fool. "I'm just passing through," she called back, keeping her voice steady despite the exhaustion that had settled into her bones. A tall man with broad shoulders stepped out from the shade of the saloon's awning. His hat was pulled low over his eyes, but she could see a well-groomed mustache and the glint of a sheriff's badge on his chest. "We don't take kindly to strangers these days," he said, his hand resting on his holstered pistol. "Not since the Carter gang hit the bank last month." Olivia straightened in her saddle. "I'm no outlaw, Sheriff. I'm looking for someone." The lawman approached cautiously, studying her with keen blue eyes. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30 or so, with the weathered skin of someone who spent most of his days under the relentless Texas sun. "And who might that be?" he asked, his tone softening slightly as he took in her travel-worn appearance. "Owen Newcomb," she replied, watching his reaction carefully. "I was told he has a ranch outside of town." The sheriff's eyebrows rose and his posture changed subtly. "The Triple N, that's about 10 miles north." His eyes narrowed. "What business do you have with Owen?" Olivia hesitated. She'd rehearsed this moment countless times during her journey, but now that it had arrived, the words stuck in her throat. "Family business," she said finally. It wasn't exactly a lie. The sheriff studied her for a long moment before nodding. "I'm Sheriff Thomas Harlow, and you are?" "Sophia O'Connor," she replied, extending her hand. "Pleased to meet you, Sheriff." He shook her hand briefly. "Miss O'Connor, I suggest you get yourself a room at the boarding house for the night. The Triple N is too far to reach before dark, and there have been mountain lions spotted on that trail recently." Olivia considered arguing but realized he was right. Her horse needed rest, and so did she. "Thank you for the advice, Sheriff." He tipped his hat and stepped back. "The boarding house is run by Widow Jenkins, 3 buildings down on your right. Tell her Tom sent you." As Olivia guided her horse toward the boarding house, she couldn't help but wonder what kind of man Owen Newcomb had become in the 15 years since she'd last seen him. Would he even remember her? And would he be willing to help once he learned why she had come all this way to find him? The boarding house was a neat 2-story building with freshly painted shutters and flower boxes beneath the windows, an unexpected touch of civilization in this dusty frontier town. Olivia dismounted, wincing at the stiffness in her legs, and tied her horse to the hitching post. The door opened before she could knock, revealing a plump woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes. "You must be the stranger Tom just sent word about," the woman said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm Eleanor Jenkins. Come in before the dust devil out there claims any more of my clean floors." Olivia smiled gratefully and followed Mrs. Jenkins inside. The interior was cool and smelled of fresh baked bread and lemon polish. After weeks of sleeping under the stars and bathing in cold streams, it seemed like paradise. "I have a room upstairs with a proper bed and washstand," Mrs. Jenkins said, leading the way. "Dinner's at 6, breakfast at 7. $1 a night including meals. Extra for bath water." "That sounds wonderful," Olivia said, already dreaming of hot water and clean sheets. "And I'd like to arrange for my horse to be stabled and fed." Mrs. Jenkins nodded. "My boy can take him over to the livery. That'll be extra, of course." "Of course," Olivia agreed, reaching for the small purse she kept secured inside her coat. She counted out several coins and handed them to Mrs. Jenkins. The older woman's eyes widened slightly at the payment, which was more than she'd asked for. "This is too much, dear." "Consider it a deposit," Olivia said. "I'm not sure how long I'll be staying." Mrs. Jenkins studied her with newfound interest. "You're here to see Owen Newcomb, Tom says." Olivia suppressed a sigh. Of course, the sheriff had already spread the word. Small towns thrived on gossip. "That's right." "Well, you've picked an interesting time to come calling," Mrs. Jenkins said, a note of something concern, warning, in her voice. "Owen don't come to town much these days, not since his wife passed last winter." Olivia felt her stomach drop. "I didn't know he was married." Mrs. Jenkins gave her a shrewd look. "Was, for 8 years to Eliza, sweetest woman you'd ever meet, left him with 3 young ones to raise on his own." She shook her head sadly. "Towns tried to help, but Owen's a proud man, won't accept much charity and those children." She trailed off. "What about the children?" Olivia asked, her throat suddenly dry. "They miss their mama something fierce," Mrs. Jenkins said softly. "Especially the little one, Abigail, just 5 years old and still calling out for her mama in the night, according to Ida, who helps with the housekeeping out there." Olivia nodded, absorbing this new information. She had come to Presidio with her own problems, seeking help from a man she barely remembered. Now it seemed Owen Newcomb had troubles of his own. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said genuinely. I didn't know." Mrs. Jenkins patted her arm. "How could you, dear? Now get yourself settled. Bath will be ready in an hour and dinner after that. You look like you could use both." After Mrs. Jenkins left, Olivia sat heavily on the bed, her mind racing. Owen was a widower with 3 children. The news shouldn't have affected her so deeply, but it did. She had built up an image of him in her mind during the long journey, the boy she remembered, grown into a man who might be in a position to help her. She hadn't considered that he might have a life of his own, with complications and heartaches that matched or exceeded her own. For a brief moment, she considered leaving, continuing west toward California, as she'd originally planned before hearing Owen had settled in Presidio. But she had nowhere else to turn. Her money was running low, and the shadow that had driven her from St. Louis might still be following. No, she decided. She would stay, at least long enough to see Owen and explain her situation. After all, they had once been family, even if only for a short while. That had to count for something. The next morning, Olivia rose before dawn, dressed in her cleanest clothes, and descended to the dining room where Mrs. Jenkins was already serving breakfast to a handful of other boarders, 2 traveling salesmen and an elderly couple. "Good morning, Miss O'Connor," Mrs. Jenkins greeted her cheerfully. "Sleep well, better than I have in weeks," Olivia admitted, accepting a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits with gravy. "And please call me Sophia." "Sophia it is," Mrs. Jenkins said with a warm smile. "Tom says he'll escort you out to the Triple N this morning if you're still set on going." Olivia nodded, though she was surprised by the offer. "That's very kind of him." "Kind has nothing to do with it," Mrs. Jenkins said with a knowing look. "Tom's sweet on Lucy, Owen's housekeeper. Finds any excuse to ride out that way." Olivia smiled at this bit of gossip. "Well, I appreciate the company all the same. The trail can be lonely." After breakfast, she found Sheriff Harlow waiting outside with 2 saddled horses. "Morning, Miss O'Connor," he said, tipping his hat. "Thought you might prefer riding to that wagon of yours for the journey to Triple N. It's a rough trail in parts." "Thank you, Sheriff," she said, approaching the smaller of the 2 horses, a chestnut mare with intelligent eyes. "She's beautiful." "That's Penny," he said. "Gentlest horse in the county, but she's got spirit when needed." They set off at an easy pace, following a trail that wound through scrubby hills dotted with mesquite and prickly pear. The morning air was still cool, but Olivia could feel the promise of heat as the sun climbed higher. After a few miles of riding in companionable silence, Sheriff Harlow cleared his throat. "Miss O'Connor, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what exactly is your connection to Owen?" Olivia had been expecting the question. "My mother married his father when we were children," she explained. "We lived as family for about 3 years until my mother passed away. Then Owen's father sent me to live with my aunt in St. Louis." The sheriff nodded slowly. "So you're his stepsister, but you haven't seen him in 15 years, Olivia confirmed. "I was 12 when I left. Owen was 14. "And now you've traveled all this way to see him," Sheriff Harlow said, a statement rather than a question. "Must be important business." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "It is." To his credit, the sheriff didn't press further. "Well, I should warn you, Owen's changed since his wife died. He was never exactly the sociable type, but now—" He shook his head. "He focuses on the ranch and those kids. Doesn't let many people close." "I understand," Olivia said, though privately she wondered if coming here had been a mistake. The Owen she remembered had been a quiet, serious boy with a quick mind and a talent for drawing. They had been friends before they became family, and even after their parents married, that friendship had persisted. But 15 years was a long time, and grief changed people. She knew that better than most. After about 2 hours of riding, they crested a hill, and Sheriff Harlow pointed to a cluster of buildings in the distance, nestled in a shallow valley beside a small creek. "That's the Triple N," he said. "One of the more prosperous spreads in the county, though you wouldn't know it to look at it." As they drew closer, Olivia could see what he meant. The ranch was well built but modest, a main house of stone and timber, a large barn, a bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. A corral held several horses, and in the distance, she could see cattle grazing on the hillsides. "Owen runs about 500 head of cattle," Sheriff Harlow explained as they approached. "Has 6 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, plus Lucy who cooks and helps with the children, and Ida who comes out from town 3 times a week to help with washing and such." Olivia nodded, taking it all in. It was a substantial operation, larger than she had imagined. Owen had done well for himself, it seemed. As they rode into the yard, a dog began to bark, and a moment later the front door of the house opened. A tall man stepped onto the porch, a rifle held casually in one hand. Even at a distance, Olivia recognized him immediately. The gangly boy had grown into his height, filled out with the lean muscle of hard work, but those eyes, intense and watchful, were the same. Owen Newcomb. Her heart beat faster as they drew rein in front of the house. Sheriff Harlow raised a hand in greeting. "Morning, Owen. Brought a visitor." Owen's gaze shifted to Olivia, his expression unreadable. For a moment he simply stared at her, and she wondered if he recognized her at all. Then something flickered in his eyes, surprise, followed by a deeper emotion she couldn't name. "Sophia," he said, his voice deep and rough as if he didn't use it often. "Hello, Owen," she replied, dismounting carefully. "It's been a long time." He came down the porch steps slowly, setting the rifle aside. Up close, she could see the changes more clearly, the fine lines around his eyes, the weathered tan of his skin, the flecks of gray at his temples, though he couldn't be more than 30. His face was leaner than she remembered, all boyish softness carved away by time and, she suspected, grief. 15 years, he said, still staring at her as if she might be a mirage. "What are you doing here?" Before she could answer, the door opened again, and 3 children spilled out onto the porch. The oldest was a boy of perhaps 8, with his father's dark hair and serious eyes. Beside him stood a girl of about 6, her blonde hair in two neat braids, and clinging to her hand was a smaller girl no more than 5 with wild curls and her thumb firmly in her mouth. "Papa," the oldest boy called. "Who is it?" Owen seemed to shake himself from a trance. "Children, this is Miss O'Connor. She's an old friend." He turned back to Olivia. "My children, James, Emma, and Abigail." The children regarded her with open curiosity. Behind them, a slender woman with graying hair appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "Lucy," Owen called to her, "we have guests. Perhaps you could bring some coffee to the porch." "Of course, Mr. Newcomb," Lucy replied, her gaze moving curiously between Owen and Olivia before she disappeared back into the house. Sheriff Harlow cleared his throat. "Well, I should be getting back to town. Miss O'Connor, I'll leave Penny with you for now. Owen can have one of his hands bring her back later." He tipped his hat. "Owen, children." As the sheriff rode away, an awkward silence fell. Olivia stood uncertainly, acutely aware of Owen's scrutiny and the children's curious stares. "Let's sit on the porch," Owen said finally, gesturing toward several chairs arranged there. "James, take the girls and help Lucy with the coffee." The boy nodded solemnly and herded his sisters back inside, though little Abigail kept turning to stare at Olivia over her shoulder. Once they were seated on the porch, Owen leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So," he said quietly, "you want to tell me what brings you all the way from St. Louis after all these years?" Olivia took a deep breath. "I need your help, Owen. I'm in trouble." His expression remained neutral, but she saw concern flicker in his eyes. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that follows," she said grimly. "I had to leave St. Louis quickly, and I needed somewhere to go, somewhere safe. I remembered you mentioned Presidio in your last letter years ago. I took a chance that you might still be here." Owen's jaw tightened. "That was 9 years ago, Sophia. The last letter I sent before you stopped writing back." She winced at the accusation in his tone. "I know, I'm sorry, life got complicated, he repeated flatly. "Complicated enough to forget family." The word stung, especially because they held truth. "I never forgot you, Owen, but after Aunt Margaret died, things changed. I had to make my own way." His expression softened slightly. "I didn't know she had passed. I'm sorry." Olivia nodded her thanks. "It was 5 years ago, pneumonia." She paused. "I heard about your wife. Mrs. Jenkins told me. I'm so sorry for your loss." Pain flashed across his face before he carefully composed his features again. "Thank you." Before she could say more, the door opened, and Lucy emerged carrying a tray with coffee and a plate of cookies. The children followed, clearly unable to contain their curiosity any longer. "Here we are," Lucy said cheerfully, setting the tray down on a small table. "Fresh coffee and some sugar cookies the children helped make yesterday." She turned to Olivia with a warm smile. "I'm Lucy Winters, Mr. Newcomb's housekeeper." "Sophia O'Connor," Olivia replied, returning the smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you." "Miss O'Connor is my stepsister," Owen explained, his tone carefully neutral. "We haven't seen each other in many years." Lucy's eyebrows rose, but she merely nodded. "Well, it's lovely to have you here, Miss O'Connor. Will you be staying for dinner?" Owen and Olivia exchanged a glance, the question hanging between them. "I'm not sure yet," Olivia said carefully. Lucy seemed to sense the tension. "Well, just let me know. Children, let's give your father and Miss O'Connor some time to catch up, shall we?" The older 2 children followed obediently, but little Abigail stood her ground, staring at Olivia with wide, solemn eyes. "Abigail," Owen said gently, "go with Lucy, please." The child shook her head, her curls bouncing. Then, to everyone's surprise, she walked directly to Olivia and climbed into her lap. "Abigail," Owen said, half rising from his chair. "I'm sorry." She's not usually so forward with strangers, but Olivia was already adjusting to accommodate the small weight in her lap. "It's all right," she said, smiling down at the child. "Hello, Abigail." Abigail studied her face intently, then reached up to touch Olivia's cheek with a small, sticky hand. "Pretty," she declared. Despite the tension of the moment, Olivia couldn't help but laugh. "Thank you." "You're very pretty yourself." Owen watched this exchange with an unreadable expression. "Abby," he said finally, his voice gentler now, "go with Lucy for now. Miss O'Connor and I need to talk about grown-up things." Reluctantly, Abigail slid off Olivia's lap and went to Lucy, but not before giving Olivia one last, lingering look. When they were alone again, Owen poured coffee for both of them. "She doesn't usually take to strangers," he said again, his tone wondering. "Not since Eliza." "Children have good instincts," Olivia said softly. "She's beautiful, Owen. All your children are." He nodded, a hint of pride breaking through his reserve. "They're everything to me now." He took a sip of coffee, then fixed her with a direct gaze. "Now tell me what kind of trouble you're in." Olivia wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup, gathering her thoughts. "After Aunt Margaret died, I took a position as a companion to an elderly woman, Mrs. Hawthorne. She was wealthy, lonely, and kind to me. When she passed away 2 years ago, she left me a substantial inheritance." Owen's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing. "Her son, Victor, contested the will," Olivia continued. "He claimed I had influenced her improperly. The court ruled in my favor, but Victor was furious. He began to harass me. Nothing I could prove at first, strange men watching my house, small items missing, that sort of thing." She paused, taking a sip of coffee to steady herself. "Then 2 months ago there was a fire at my house in the middle of the night. I barely escaped. The authorities called it an accident, but I knew better. A week later I was attacked on my way home from a friend's house. The man had a knife. He said Victor sent him with a message that next time he wouldn't miss." Owen's expression had darkened as she spoke. "Did you go to the law?" Olivia laughed bitterly. "Victor Hawthorne is one of the most influential men in St. Louis. His brother-in-law is the police commissioner. I tried, but—" She shook her head. "They suggested I was imagining things, that perhaps I should see a doctor about my female hysteria." Owen's jaw tightened. "So you ran?" "I ran," she confirmed. "I withdrew as much money as I could, sold what valuables I had, and left that night. I've been traveling for nearly a month, taking indirect routes, never staying in one place too long." She met his gaze directly. "I don't think he followed me this far, but I can't be certain, and I have nowhere else to go." Owen was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "What exactly are you asking of me, Sophia?" "A safe place to stay," she said simply. "Just until I figure out what to do next. I have money I can pay for room and board." "I don't want your money," he said sharply, then seemed to regret his tone. More gently he added, "Your family, Sophia, or you were once." "I still am," she said quietly, "if you'll have me." He studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "We have a spare room. It's small, but it's yours if you want it, at least until you decide on your next move." Relief washed over her. "Thank you, Owen. I won't be a burden, I promise. I can help around the house, with the children, whatever you need." Something flickered in his eyes at that, but he merely nodded. "Lucy will show you to your room. We can bring your things from town tomorrow." He stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "Dinner's at 6. I need to check on the herd now." As he strode away toward the barn, Olivia watched him go, uncertain whether to feel relief or apprehension. She had found refuge, at least temporarily. But Owen Newcomb was not the boy she remembered, and she sensed that gaining his trust again would not be easy. Inside the house, Lucy was waiting. "Mr. Newcomb says you'll be staying with us," she said with a warm smile. Let me show you to your room." The house was simply but comfortably furnished, with polished wooden floors and windows that let in plenty of light. Lucy led her up a narrow staircase to a small bedroom at the back of the house. "It's not much," Lucy apologized, "but it's clean, and the view is nice." The room contained a narrow bed, a small chest of drawers, and a rocking chair by the window, which looked out over the creek and the rolling hills beyond. A faded quilt covered the bed, and simple curtains framed the window. "It's perfect," Olivia said sincerely. "Thank you." Lucy hesitated in the doorway. "Miss O'Connor, may I speak frankly?" Olivia nodded, curious. "Mr. Newcomb has had a hard time since Mrs. Eliza passed," Lucy said, her voice soft but earnest. "The children, especially little Abigail, they took it hard. And Mr. Newcomb, well, he blames himself, though it wasn't his fault. Childbed fever takes so many women." She shook her head sadly. "He's a good man, Miss O'Connor, but he's hurting. The children, they miss their mother something terrible. Especially her touch, the way she'd smooth their hair, hold them when they were frightened. Mr. Newcomb tries, but—" "It's not the same," Olivia finished for her. Lucy nodded. "Exactly. So, whatever brought you here, I'm glad you've come. Perhaps you can help bring some light back into this house." With that, she left Olivia alone with her thoughts. She sat in the rocking chair, gazing out at the Texas landscape, so different from the city streets she was used to. This wasn't how she had imagined her reunion with Owen. In her mind, he had welcomed her with open arms, remembered their childhood friendship with fondness. The reality was more complicated. But then, wasn't everything? Later that evening, dinner was a surprisingly lively affair. Despite Owen's continued reserve, the children, particularly Emma and Abigail, were full of questions for their new guest. "You live in a big city?" Emma asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "I did," Olivia confirmed, smiling at the girl's enthusiasm. "In St. Louis." "It's very different from here, lots of buildings close together and carriages everywhere." "You have horses in the city?" James wanted to know. "Many people do, for pulling carriages or wagons," Olivia explained, "but not for riding the way you do here." "Can you ride?" James asked, skeptical. "Not very well," Olivia admitted with a laugh. "I managed to get here, but I'm sure I look quite clumsy compared to you." "I could teach you," James offered unexpectedly. "I'm the best rider in my class at school." "James," Owen said quietly, "Miss O'Connor may not be here long enough for riding lessons." The boy's face fell, and Olivia felt a pang of guilt. "I'd love to learn, James, even if it's just a few basics," she said quickly. "If your father doesn't mind." Owen's expression was unreadable as he met her gaze across the table. "That's fine," he said finally. "James is a good teacher." Throughout the meal, Olivia noticed little Abigail watching her intently. The child barely spoke, but her eyes followed Olivia's every move. When Lucy served apple pie for dessert, Abigail struggled with her fork, unable to cut through the crust. Without thinking, Olivia leaned over and gently cut the pie into small bites. "There you go, sweetheart," she said softly. Abigail beamed at her, and Olivia felt something tug at her heart. When dinner was over, Lucy began clearing the dishes, and Olivia rose to help. "You don't need to do that," Owen said quickly. "You're a guest." "I'd like to help," Olivia insisted. "I'm not used to sitting idle." Owen studied her for a moment, then nodded. "As you wish." In the kitchen, Olivia and Lucy worked side by side, washing and drying the dishes as they chatted about life on the ranch. Through the open doorway, Olivia could hear Owen in the main room, his deep voice reading a story to the children. The domesticity of it all struck her forcefully. How different it was from her solitary life in St. Louis, where her closest companions had been books and the occasional visit from a neighbor. "He's a good father," Lucy commented, following Olivia's gaze. works himself to exhaustion trying to be both mother and father to those children on top of running the ranch. I can see that, Olivia said softly. The children seem happy despite everything. Lucy nodded. They are, mostly, but they need more than he can give alone. She gave Olivia a meaningful look. Family is important, Miss O'Connor, more important than pride or old hurts. Before Olivia could respond, tiny footsteps pattered into the kitchen and Abigail appeared, clutching a well-worn rag doll. Without a word, she came straight to Olivia and raised her arms to be picked up. Olivia hesitated, glancing at Lucy, who nodded encouragement. Carefully, she dried her hands and lifted the child. Abigail immediately settled against her shoulder, one small hand coming up to play with a strand of Olivia's hair. "Story," Abigail said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You want me to read you a story?" Olivia asked, surprised. Abigail nodded solemnly. "Please." "Well, how can I refuse such a polite request?" Olivia smiled, carrying Abigail back to the main room. Owen looked up from the book he was reading to James and Emma, his expression shifting from surprise to something more complex when he saw Abigail in Olivia's arms. "She wants a story," Olivia explained, feeling suddenly self-conscious. Owen nodded slowly. "She usually falls asleep during story time. Would you mind if I—" Olivia gestured to an empty chair near the fireplace. "Go ahead," he said, his voice oddly tight. Olivia sat, adjusting Abigail in her lap. The child immediately snuggled closer, her doll clutched to her chest, eyes fixed expectantly on Olivia's face. "Once upon a time," Olivia began, making up a story as she went along, "there was a little girl who lived in a beautiful house by a stream." As she spoke, she found herself absently stroking Abigail's soft curls, the way her own mother had done for her when she was small. Gradually, the child's eyes grew heavy, until finally they closed completely, her breathing deepening into sleep. When Olivia looked up, she found Owen watching her, an unreadable expression on his face. James and Emma, too, had abandoned their own story to listen to hers. "That was a good story," Emma said approvingly. "Did you make it up yourself?" Olivia nodded, smiling. "I did. I used to make up stories for the children I tutored in St. Louis." "You're good at it," James said seriously. "Abby usually doesn't sit still for stories except when Pa tells them." Owen cleared his throat. "It's bedtime for all of you," he said, closing his book. "James, Emma, go wash up. I'll be up to tuck you in soon." The older children obediently headed upstairs, though Emma paused to give Olivia a shy smile before she went. Owen approached the chair where Olivia sat with the sleeping Abigail. "I can take her," he said quietly. "She's fine," Olivia assured him. "I don't mind." "Unless you'd rather." He hesitated, then shook his head. "No, she seems comfortable with you." There was a note of wonder in his voice and perhaps a touch of something else, concern or even jealousy. "She's a sweet child," Olivia said softly, gazing down at Abigail's peaceful face. "They all are. You've done well with them, Owen." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "I do what I can. It's not enough, but—" He trailed off, then squared his shoulders. "Her bedroom is the first door on the right at the top of the stairs. She's still in a crib. Eliza was going to move her to a regular bed, but—" He stopped abruptly. "I'll take her up," Olivia said gently. Carrying Abigail carefully, she climbed the stairs and found the child's room a small, cheerful space with yellow curtains and a painted frieze of flowers around the walls. As she laid Abigail in her crib, the child stirred briefly, her eyes opening to sleepy slits. "Mama," she murmured drowsily. Olivia's heart caught. "No, sweetheart, it's Sophia. Go back to sleep now." Abigail's eyes closed again, but her small hand gripped Olivia's finger tightly. "Stay," she whispered. "Just until you're asleep," Olivia promised, smoothing the child's hair back from her forehead. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, watching Abigail sleep, but eventually she became aware of a presence behind her. Turning, she found Owen in the doorway, his expression softer than she had seen it all day. "She's asleep," Olivia whispered, carefully extracting her finger from Abigail's grasp. Owen nodded and stepped back to let her pass. In the hallway, he paused, his voice low. "She hasn't fallen asleep that easily since Eliza died. Usually it takes hours of rocking and stories." Olivia didn't know what to say to that. "Children can sense when someone cares," she offered finally. "And I do care, Owen, about all of you." He studied her face in the dim light of the hallway lamp. "Why did you really come here, Sophia, after all these years?" She met his gaze steadily. "I told you the truth. I'm in trouble and I needed a safe place, but—" She took a deep breath. "But I also remembered you, remembered our friendship. I've missed that, missed having family." Something in his expression shifted, softened. "We were close once," he acknowledged. "Before everything changed." "We were," she agreed softly. "And I'm sorry I didn't stay in touch better. Life got complicated, as I said. But I never forgot you, Owen." He was silent for a long moment. Then, "Get some rest, Sophia. Tomorrow we'll be here before you know it." As she turned toward her own room, he added, "And Sophia, I'm glad you're safe." It wasn't forgiveness or a warm welcome, but it was a start. As Olivia prepared for bed in the small, simple room that was now hers, she found herself thinking of Abigail's trusting weight in her arms, of James's serious offer to teach her to ride, of Emma's shy smile, and of Owen, the boy she had known, now buried beneath the grief and responsibility of the man he had become. For the first time in months, she slept without fear, without listening for footsteps or watching shadows. Instead, she dreamed of wide open spaces, of children's laughter, and of a pair of dark, watchful eyes that had once looked at her with friendship, and might someday do so again. The next morning, Olivia woke to the sounds of a household already in motion, children's voices, the clatter of dishes, the creak of floorboards. For a moment, she was disoriented, expecting the familiar noises of St. Louis carriages on cobblestones, vendors calling their wares. Then memory returned, and with it, a sense of both relief and uncertainty. She dressed quickly in one of her simpler dresses, a blue cotton that had seen better days, but was practical for ranch life, and made her way downstairs. In the kitchen, she found Lucy preparing breakfast, James setting the table, and Emma helping Abigail into her chair. Owen was nowhere to be seen. "Good morning," Olivia said, smiling at the children. "Can I help with anything?" "Good morning, Miss O'Connor," James said formally. "Pa's already out checking the cattle. He said to tell you he'd be back for breakfast." "And that we should be nice to you," Emma added, her expression serious. "But we're always nice, aren't we, James?" "Most times," her brother conceded, earning a laugh from Lucy. "You can help by pouring the milk if you don't mind," Lucy suggested, nodding toward a pitcher on the counter. As Olivia moved to do so, a small voice piped up. "Fia." She turned to find Abigail beaming at her, arms outstretched. "Good morning to you too, little one," Olivia said, smiling as she set the pitcher down to give the child a quick hug. "Fia's story," Abigail insisted, patting Olivia's cheek with a sticky hand. "Later, perhaps," Olivia promised. "After breakfast." By the time Owen returned, they were all seated around the table, a picture of domestic harmony that seemed to give him pause as he entered. His gaze lingered on Olivia, sitting beside Abigail and helping the child manage her spoon. "Good morning," he said, his voice gruff as he took his place at the head of the table. "Sleep well." "Very well, thank you," Olivia replied. "Your home is peaceful." Owen's lips quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile, Not always, but I'm glad you found it so. Breakfast was a lively affair, with James eager to tell his father about a schoolbook on explorers, and Emma proudly recounting how she had helped Lucy with the biscuits. Abigail contributed occasional unintelligible comments, which Olivia found herself translating with surprising accuracy. "She wants more honey," Olivia explained when Abigail pointed insistently at her biscuit. Owen raised an eyebrow. "You understand her. Even Lucy has trouble sometimes." Olivia shrugged, a bit embarrassed. "I worked with young children in St. Louis. You develop an ear for it." After breakfast, Owen announced his plans for the day. "I need to ride out to the north pasture with the men. James, you have school. Emma, you're helping Lucy with the mending today." He turned to Olivia. "I thought we might ride into town later to collect your things from the boarding house, if that suits you." "That would be fine," Olivia agreed. "In the meantime, perhaps I can help Lucy with the household tasks." "Actually," Lucy interjected, "I wonder if Miss O'Connor might watch Abigail for me. I need to make soap today, and it's not safe to have the little one underfoot with the lie." Owen looked uncertain. "Abigail can be a handful." "I don't mind," Olivia assured him. "We'll find ways to keep busy, won't we, Abigail?" The little girl nodded enthusiastically, already climbing down from her chair to take Olivia's hand. Owen still seemed hesitant, but finally nodded. "All right, but if she becomes too much, just bring her to Lucy." "We'll be fine," Olivia said confidently. "Won't we, Abigail?" The child nodded solemnly. "Fine," she echoed. After the others had dispersed to their various tasks, James to school, Emma and Lucy to the mending, and Owen to the pastures, Olivia found herself alone with Abigail in the main room of the house. The little girl stood looking up at her expectantly, her rag doll clutched in one hand. "Well," Olivia said, kneeling to Abigail's level. "What shall we do today? Story?" Abigail suggested hopefully. Olivia laughed. "We can certainly read stories, but perhaps we should do some other things too." "Do you like to draw?" Abigail's face lit up. "Draw? Papa draws." "Does he?" Olivia was surprised. The Owen she remembered had loved to draw, spending hours sketching the world around him. She hadn't been sure if he still pursued that interest. "Show you," Abigail insisted, tugging at Olivia's hand. The child led her to a small desk in the corner of the room. With some effort, Abigail pulled open a drawer and extracted a leather-bound sketchbook. "Papa's," she explained, handling it with obvious reverence. "Oh, I'm not sure we should." Olivia began, but Abigail had already opened the book, turning pages with careful fingers. The sketches inside took Olivia's breath away. Owen had always been talented, but these drawings, landscapes of the ranch, detailed studies of horses and cattle, and most of all, portraits of the children showed a skill that had matured and deepened over the years. Each line was confident, each shadow perfectly placed. And then she turned a page and found herself looking at a portrait of a young woman with gentle eyes and a warm smile. Eliza, she realized. Owen's wife. The resemblance to Abigail was unmistakable in the curve of the mouth, the shape of the eyes. "Mama," Abigail said softly, touching the page with one small finger. "She was very beautiful," Olivia said gently. Abigail nodded. "In heaven now," she said matter-of-factly. "Papa said." "Yes," Olivia agreed, her throat tight, "but I'm sure she's watching over you and she loves you very much." Abigail considered this, then pointed to another drawing, this one of all three children together, laughing. "Papa draws us." "He's very good," Olivia said sincerely. She carefully closed the sketchbook and returned it to the drawer. "Maybe we could make our own drawings today. Would you like that?" Abigail nodded eagerly, and Olivia found paper and pencils in another drawer. They settled at the small kitchen table, where Abigail devoted herself to creating elaborate scribbles, while Olivia attempted to sketch the view from the window. Later, they moved outside to the porch, where Abigail introduced Olivia to her collection of special rocks and showed her how the ranch dogs would perform tricks for bits of bacon saved from breakfast. When Abigail grew tired, Olivia rocked her on the porch swing, singing soft lullabies until the child fell asleep against her shoulder. That was how Owen found them when he returned from the pastures, Olivia gently rocking, Abigail sleeping peacefully in her arms. He paused at the foot of the porch steps, his expression unreadable. "She wore herself out showing me all her treasures," Olivia explained softly. "She's a delightful child, Owen." He climbed the steps slowly, his gaze fixed on his daughter's peaceful face. "She doesn't usually nap without a fight," he said, his voice low. "And she certainly doesn't usually take to strangers this way." "I'm hardly a stranger," Olivia pointed out. "I'm family, or I was once." Owen met her eyes then, something shifting in his expression. "Yes," he said finally. "I suppose you were." He held out his arms. "I can take her now. She'll sleep better in her bed." Carefully, Olivia transferred the sleeping child to her father's embrace. Owen held her with practiced ease, his large hand gently cradling her head. "Thank you for watching her," he said quietly. "It's been good for her, I think." "It was my pleasure," Olivia assured him. "Truly." As Owen carried Abigail inside, Olivia remained on the porch, thinking about the day, about the sketchbook, about the gentle way Owen held his daughter. There were glimpses here of the boy she had known, the artist's eye, the quiet kindness but layered with something deeper, something forged through love and loss. When he returned, Owen sat beside her on the swing, maintaining a careful distance between them. For a few minutes, they simply rocked in companionable silence, looking out at the ranch yard and the hills beyond. "You're good with her," Owen said finally. "With all the children, really." Olivia smiled. "They make it easy. They're wonderful, Owen." "You've done an amazing job with them, especially under the circumstances." He looked down at his hands, strong, calloused hands marked with the evidence of hard work. "I do my best, but it's not enough. They need—" He trailed off. "A mother's touch," Olivia supplied gently. Owen nodded, his jaw tight. Eliza was. She had a way with them, especially Abigail. Since she died, Abby's barely spoken. The doctor in town says it's the shock that she'll grow out of it, but I worry. "She spoke quite a bit today," Olivia offered. "She's very bright." "She was with you," Owen said, giving her a sidelong glance. "That's unusual." Olivia wasn't sure how to respond to that. After a moment, she said, "Children are resilient, Owen. With love and patience they heal, and they have that in abundance here." He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing past the surface to the person beneath. "Why didn't you ever marry, Sophia? You would have made a good mother." The question caught her off guard. "I came close once," she admitted. "His name was William. He was a professor at the university in St. Louis. Kind, intelligent. But then Aunt Margaret fell ill and I became her caretaker. William wasn't willing to wait." "His loss," Owen said simply. Olivia felt a warmth spread through her at the unexpected compliment. "What about you?" she asked. "How did you meet Eliza?" A ghost of a smile touched Owen's lips. "At a barn raising. I was helping build for a neighbor and she was serving lemonade. She spilled an entire pitcher on me, then spent the next hour apologizing. By the end of the day, I was half in love with her already." "She sounds wonderful," Olivia said sincerely. "She was," Owen agreed, his voice soft with memory. Then, shaking himself from reverie, he stood. "We should head to town for your things before it gets too late. I'll have one of the hands saddle horses for us." The ride to Presidio was pleasant, the afternoon sun warm but not overpowering. Owen proved to be a patient riding instructor, offering quiet advice when Olivia struggled with her mount. "You're doing fine," he assured her when she apologized for her clumsiness. "Nobody's born knowing how to ride. James will have you galloping across the plains in no time." "I'm not sure my nerves could handle galloping," Olivia laughed, "but I would like to improve enough not to embarrass myself." In town, they stopped first at the livery to arrange for Olivia's wagon and remaining belongings to be brought to the ranch. Then they made their way to Widow Jenkins' boarding house. Mrs. Jenkins greeted them warmly, though her sharp eyes noted the more relaxed manner between them. "I see you two have sorted things out," she said approvingly. "Family should stick together, especially in times of trouble." As Olivia gathered her few possessions from the room, Owen settled the bill, ignoring Olivia's protests that she should pay. "You can contribute to the household in other ways," he insisted. "Your money should be saved for whatever comes next." The implication that her stay was temporary hung between them, unaddressed. Their last stop was the general store, where Owen needed to order supplies for the ranch. As they entered, the bell above the door jingled, drawing the attention of the few customers inside. A middle-aged woman examining bolts of cloth, an elderly man perusing seed catalogs, and Sheriff Harlow, who was engaged in conversation with the storekeeper. "Owen," the sheriff greeted, looking between him and Olivia with undisguised curiosity. "Miss O'Connor, I see you've settled in at the Triple N." "She has," Owen confirmed, his tone neutral. "Sophia will be staying with us for a while." The sheriff's eyebrows rose slightly. "Well, that's good news. The children must be pleased to have a visitor." "They've taken to her," Owen acknowledged, "especially Abigail." This statement clearly surprised the sheriff, who knew how withdrawn the youngest Newcomb child had been since her mother's death. "Is that so? Well, that's real good to hear, Owen." While the men discussed ranch business, Olivia wandered the store, making a mental list of items that might be needed at the house. She was examining a display of hair ribbons, thinking Emma might enjoy a new one, when she became aware of someone standing beside her. "You must be Owen Newcomb's stepsister," a woman's voice said. "I'm Martha Peterson, the school teacher here in Presidio. Your arrival has been the talk of the town." Olivia turned to find a pleasant-faced woman, perhaps a few years older than herself, dressed simply but neatly in a gray dress with white collar and cuffs. "Sophia O'Connor," she introduced herself, offering her hand. "And yes, I suppose small towns do love their gossip." Martha laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "They certainly do. But in this case, I think the interest comes from genuine concern for Owen and those children. They've had a rough time of it." "So I understand," Olivia said carefully. "James is one of my best students," Martha continued. "Bright as they come, but so serious for his age. And Emma starts school next term. She's already reading quite well, from what James tells me." "They're remarkable children," Olivia agreed. "Owen has done well by them." "He has," Martha nodded, "but a man can only do so much alone." She gave Olivia a meaningful look. "Having family around will be good for all of them, I think. How long do you plan to stay in Presidio?" It was the question everyone seemed to be asking, directly or indirectly. "I'm not certain," Olivia admitted. "It depends on several factors." "Well, I hope it's for a good long while," Martha said warmly. "And if you ever want to visit the school or perhaps help with our little lending library, we'd be most welcome. We can always use another pair of educated hands." "I'd like that," Olivia said, realizing she meant it. The prospect of becoming part of this community, of having a purpose beyond hiding, appealed to her deeply. As they rode back to the ranch, the afternoon sun gilding the hills around them, Owen was quieter than usual, seemingly lost in thought. "Something on your mind?" Olivia finally asked when the silence grew too heavy. He glanced at her, then back at the trail. Just thinking about what Martha said to you about staying. Olivia felt a flutter of anxiety. Were you eavesdropping, Owen Newcomb? A faint smile touched his lips. Small store. Hard not to overhear. She waited for him to continue, and after a moment he did. I want you to know that you're welcome to stay as long as you need to, he said slowly, choosing his words with care. Not just because of the trouble you're in, but because. He paused, struggling to articulate his thoughts. The children like having you there, and it's good to have family around, like Martha said. Thank you, Olivia said softly. That means a great deal to me. They rode in silence for a while longer before Owen spoke again. I've been thinking about what you said, about Victor Hawthorne. If he's as dangerous and influential as you believe, just disappearing might not be enough. You might need to consider a more permanent solution. Olivia looked at him sharply. What kind of solution? A legal one, Owen clarified quickly. Sheriff Harlow has contacts in the Rangers. They might be able to help build a case against him, even from a distance. It would be safer than always looking over your shoulder. The idea was both frightening and appealing. You think that's possible? Owen nodded. I think it's worth exploring. Sheriff Harlow is a good man. He understands how the law works and, more importantly, how to make it work for those who need protection. Olivia considered this as they rode. The prospect of actually confronting Victor, of seeking justice rather than merely hiding from him, had never seemed possible before. But perhaps, with Owen's help and the resources of the Texas Rangers, it could be done. I'll think about it, she promised. When they returned to the ranch, they found a scene of domestic chaos. Lucy was attempting to prepare dinner while simultaneously supervising Emma's reading lesson and preventing Abigail from emptying every pot in the kitchen onto the floor. Oh, thank heavens, Lucy exclaimed when they entered. Miss O'Connor, would you mind terribly taking Abigail? She's been asking for Fia since she woke from her nap. Of course, Olivia agreed, immediately scooping up the squirming child, who responded with a delighted squeal. Let's give Lucy some peace, shall we? Owen watched this exchange with an unreadable expression, then turned to help Lucy restore order to the kitchen. Olivia carried Abigail to the main room, where she settled in the rocking chair with the child on her lap. Story, Fia, Abigail demanded, snuggling close. How about a song first? Olivia suggested, beginning to rock gently. She started to sing a lullaby her own mother had sung to her, a soft, sweet melody about stars and dreams. Abigail listened, entranced, her small hand coming up to play with a strand of Olivia's hair. By the time the song ended, the child was heavy-lidded and calm. Again, she murmured sleepily. Olivia obliged, singing softly as she rocked, one hand smoothing Abigail's unruly curls. She was so absorbed in the moment that she didn't notice Owen standing in the doorway until she looked up at the end of the song. His expression stopped her breath. There was longing there, and grief, and something else, something that made her heart beat faster. He watched them for a long moment, then quietly withdrew, leaving Olivia with the weight of Abigail in her arms and a strange, fluttering sensation in her chest. That night after dinner, once the children were in bed, Owen invited Olivia to join him on the porch. The night was clear, the stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet darkness of the Texas sky. A gentle breeze carried the scent of sage and distant rain. It's beautiful here, Olivia said softly, settling into the porch swing. So different from the city. Owen nodded, leaning against the porch railing. It gets under your skin after a while. I tried living in San Antonio for a year after my father died, working as a clerk in a law office. Couldn't stand the confinement. I didn't know you studied law, Olivia said, surprised. For a time, Owen confirmed. It wasn't for me. I needed open spaces, room to breathe. When I had the chance to buy this ranch, I took it, even though everyone said I was a fool to try ranching on my own at 22. But you succeeded, Olivia observed. You built all this yourself. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I got lucky with the land and I had good men working for me, and then Eliza came along and… He trailed off, looking out at the darkened landscape. She must have been quite a woman, Olivia said gently, to partner with you in building this life. She was, Owen agreed, his voice soft with memory. She had dreams for this place, a proper garden, maybe a schoolroom for the children, eventually a bigger house. We were just starting to plan for it when she got pregnant with Abigail. The grief in his voice was palpable, and Olivia found herself wanting to comfort him, though she knew no words would suffice. Instead, she simply offered her presence, letting the silence between them become a space for remembrance. After a while, Owen spoke again, his voice steadier. Earlier today, when I saw you with Abigail, it reminded me of how Eliza used to sing to her. Same rocking chair, same way of smoothing her hair. He glanced at Olivia. It hit me hard, but it was good, too, to see Abby respond that way again. Children need that kind of touch, Olivia said softly, that gentle reassurance. Owen was quiet for a moment, then said, almost to himself, they miss her touch, all of them, but especially Abby. The words hung in the night air, simple but profound in their honesty. Before Olivia could respond, Owen straightened and cleared his throat. It's getting late. We should turn in. As they walked inside, Olivia found herself thinking about what Owen had said about the children missing their mother's touch. It was a physical absence as much as an emotional one, the lack of a gentle hand smoothing hair, adjusting clothes, offering comfort. No matter how much Owen loved them, he couldn't fully fill that void. In her room that night, as she prepared for bed, Olivia made a quiet decision. She had come to the Triple N seeking refuge, but perhaps there was a purpose in her being here, a way she could help heal this family even as she sought healing for herself. Then I'll stay, she whispered to the darkness, till they don't need me anymore. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly natural. Each morning, Olivia rose early to help Lucy prepare breakfast for the household. Owen would already be out checking the cattle with his ranch hands, returning just as the children were sitting down to eat. James would leave for school, riding his pony alongside the foreman's son who lived in the bunkhouse with his father. Emma divided her time between helping Lucy with simple household tasks and lessons that Olivia began providing reading, writing, and basic arithmetic to prepare her for school in the fall. And Abigail, little Abigail, was Olivia's shadow, following her from task to task, chattering more each day in her childish language that Olivia somehow always understood. A week after Olivia's arrival, as she was hanging laundry on the line while Abigail helped by handing her clothespins, Owen approached from the barn. He'd been breaking a new horse all morning, and there was dirt on his clothes and a fresh scrape on his cheek, but he was smiling, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Successful morning?" Olivia asked, pegging a sheet to the line. "Very," he confirmed. "That bay gelding is going to make a fine cutting horse once he settles down." He watched as Abigail solemnly handed Olivia another clothespin, then bent down to the child's level. "And how are you helping Miss Sophia today, little one?" "Pins, Papa," Abigail explained, holding up a clothespin for his inspection. "I see that," Owen said seriously. "You're being a big help." "Fia said," Abigail agreed, nodding importantly. Owen's gaze shifted to Olivia, his expression warming. "Miss Sophia is right. You're the best helper on the ranch." Abigail beamed, then scampered off to chase a butterfly that had caught her attention. "She's talking more," Owen observed, straightening. "More than I've heard in months." Children heal at their own pace, Olivia said, reaching for another sheet. She just needed time and perhaps someone new to talk to. Owen took the clothespin from her hand, their fingers brushing briefly. "It's more than that," he said quietly. "You have a way with her, with all of them, really. They've come alive since you arrived." Olivia felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the Texas sun. "They're wonderful children. It's easy to love them." The word hung between them, unexamined but not unnoticed. Owen's gaze held hers for a long moment, and Olivia found herself unable to look away. There was something in his eyes, a question, perhaps, or the beginning of an answer. The moment was broken by Abigail's return, the butterfly forgotten as she demanded more pins to hand to Olivia. Owen stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should get cleaned up before lunch," he said, his voice slightly rough. "The men and I will be riding the north boundary this afternoon. Might be back late." Olivia nodded, turning her attention back to the laundry. But as Owen walked away, she found herself watching him go, wondering about the moment that had passed between them and what it might mean. That evening, as Olivia was reading to Emma and Abigail in the main room, there was a commotion outside, the sound of horses arriving at speed, men's voices raised in urgency. Moments later, the door burst open, and two of Owen's ranch hands carried him inside, his face pale with pain, a makeshift bandage soaked with blood wrapped around his right thigh. "Owen," Olivia gasped, rising so quickly that Abigail, who had been in her lap, slid to the floor. "Pa!" Emma cried, rushing forward only to be gently intercepted by Lucy, who had emerged from the kitchen at the noise. "It's all right, Emma," Lucy soothed, though her own face had drained of color. "Your pa's had an accident, that's all." "Let's get the children upstairs," she added to Olivia, already shepherding Emma toward the stairs. But Olivia was focused on Owen, who was now being laid carefully on the sofa. "What happened?" she demanded of the ranch hands. "Rattlesnake spooked his horse," explained Miguel, the older of the two men. "Mr. Newcomb took a bad fall, landed on some rocks, cut his leg open, something fierce." "I've sent Johnny for the doctor," added the other hand, a young man named Charlie, "but it'll be hours before he can get here from town." Owen, who had been grimacing in silence, finally spoke. "It's not that bad," he insisted, though the pallor of his face belied his words. "Just a deep cut. Need it cleaned and stitched." Olivia was already rolling up her sleeves. "Lucy," she called, "I need hot water, clean cloths, whiskey if you have it, and your sewing kit. Quickly, please." Lucy, who had managed to get the wide-eyed children upstairs, appeared in the doorway. "I'll fetch everything," she promised, disappearing back into the kitchen. "You know what you're doing?" Miguel asked Olivia, his expression doubtful. "I helped a doctor in St. Louis for 2 years," she replied, already carefully unwrapping the blood-soaked bandage from Owen's leg. "And I've stitched up worse than this." The wound was deep, a jagged tear about 6 inches long on the outside of Owen's thigh. It was bleeding steadily but not spurting, which meant no major arteries had been hit. Still, it needed cleaning and closing quickly to prevent infection. Lucy returned with the supplies, and Olivia set to work, first cutting away Owen's torn trousers to better access the wound. "This is going to hurt," she warned him as she prepared to clean the cut with whiskey-soaked cloth. Owen's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Do what you have to do." He made no sound as she cleaned the wound, though the tension in his body and the sweat beading on his forehead spoke volumes about his pain. When she was satisfied that the cut was as clean as possible, she threaded a needle with silk thread from Lucy's sewing kit. "The whiskey is for drinking, too," she told Owen, offering him the bottle. "This next part will be worse." He took a long swallow, then another, before handing the bottle back. "Go ahead." Olivia worked quickly but carefully, her stitches small and neat. Owen remained stoically silent throughout, though his hands gripped the edges of the sofa with white-knuckled intensity. When she finally tied off the last stitch, she sat back, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. "Done," she said softly. "We'll need to keep it clean and watch for infection, but I think you'll heal well." Owen's eyes, which had been fixed on the ceiling throughout the procedure, now shifted to her face. "Thank you," he said simply, but the depth of feeling in those two words made something flutter in Olivia's chest. "Let me wrap it properly," she said, reaching for the clean bandages Lucy had brought. As she worked, she was acutely aware of Owen's gaze on her, of the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers. When she finished, she looked up to find him still watching her, his expression open in a way she hadn't seen before. "You're good at that," he said quietly. "I've had practice," she replied, beginning to gather the bloodied cloths and supplies. "Not just the doctoring," Owen clarified. "Taking charge, knowing what needs to be done." Olivia wasn't sure how to respond to that. Before she could formulate a reply, there was a small sound from the doorway. They both turned to see Abigail standing there, her eyes huge in her small face as she took in the scene, the blood, her father's pale features, the strangers still hovering nearby. "Papa hurt?" she asked in a tremulous voice. "Come here, little one," Owen said, holding out his hand to her. "I'm all right, just a cut on my leg. Miss Sophia fixed it." Abigail approached cautiously, climbing onto the sofa beside her father and curling against his side, careful not to touch his injured leg. "Fia make better?" she asked, looking to Olivia for confirmation. "That's right," Olivia assured her, smoothing the child's tangled curls. "Your papa will be just fine. He needs to rest for a few days, that's all." "I'll stay," Abigail declared firmly, nestling closer to Owen. Owen's arm came around his daughter, holding her close. His eyes met Olivia's over Abigail's head, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection deeper than words. "Yes," he said softly, still holding Olivia's gaze. "Sometimes staying is exactly what's needed." The next few days were a study in adaptation, as the household adjusted to Owen's temporary incapacity. Though he chafed at the restriction, Olivia insisted he remain on the first floor, converting the small study off the main room into a temporary bedroom to save him navigating the stairs. The ranch hands, led by Miguel, took over the daily management of the cattle and property, reporting to Owen each evening. Olivia found herself naturally assuming many of Owen's household responsibilities, overseeing the children's routines, making decisions about meals and supplies, even helping James with his arithmetic when he struggled with a particularly difficult problem. She moved through these tasks with a quiet confidence that seemed to reassure everyone, especially the children. On the third evening after Owen's accident, as Olivia was tucking Abigail into her crib, the child looked up at her with solemn eyes. "Stay, Fia," she said, her small hand clutching Olivia's finger. "Stay forever." The simple request pierced Olivia's heart. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, smoothing Abigail's curls. "I'll stay as long as I can. Promise." Abigail insisted, her eyes already growing heavy with sleep. "I promise to stay as long as you need me," Olivia said softly, bending to kiss the child's forehead. As she straightened, she became aware of a presence in the doorway. Owen stood there, leaning on the cane he had grudgingly accepted for support, watching them with an unreadable expression. "You shouldn't be on that leg," Olivia scolded gently as she joined him in the hallway, pulling Abigail's door partially closed behind her. "It's healing well, thanks to your care," Owen replied. "And I was restless, needed to check on the children myself." They moved slowly toward the stairs, Owen's cane thumping softly on the wooden floor. As they reached the top of the staircase, he paused, turning to face her. "I heard what Abigail asked you," he said quietly. "About staying." Olivia felt a flush rise to her cheeks. Children that age don't understand the concept of temporary. Everything is forever to them. Owen studied her face in the dim light of the hallway lamp. "And what did you say to her?" "I couldn't quite hear." "I promise to stay as long as she needs me," Olivia admitted, meeting his gaze steadily. Something shifted in Owen's expression, a softening, a vulnerability that made him look younger, more like the boy she remembered. "And if that's a very long time?" he asked, his voice low. "Children have a way of needing people indefinitely." Olivia's heart beat faster at the implication of his words. "Owen," she began, not quite sure what she wanted to say, but Owen wasn't finished. "It's not just Abigail," he said, taking a step closer despite his injured leg. "James asked me yesterday if you were going to be his new mother. And Emma." He shook his head, a faint smile touching his lips. "Emma's already planning to show you off to her friends when school starts." "I didn't know," Olivia said softly, though the children's attachment didn't surprise her. She had grown to love them fiercely in the short time she'd been at the Triple N. "And it's not just the children," Owen continued, his voice dropping even lower. "Lucy says the house hasn't felt this much like a home since Eliza died. Miguel tells me the men have noticed how much better I am since you arrived. Less haunted," he said. Olivia wasn't sure how to respond to these revelations. "I'm glad I've been able to help," she said finally. Owen shook his head as if frustrated by her response. "You don't understand, Sophia. It's not about help or even about need, it's about—" He paused, searching for the right words. "It's about belonging. You belong here with us, with me." The directness of his statement took her breath away. "Owen, I know it's too soon," he interrupted. "I know you came here running from danger, not looking for whatever this is becoming. And I know I'm still carrying grief for Eliza, but I need you to know that you have a place here, a permanent one if you want it." Olivia's mind whirled with the implications of what he was saying. She had come to the Triple N seeking temporary refuge, expecting at best a cordial reception from her former stepbrother. She had not expected to find a home, a purpose, or these feelings that grew stronger with each passing day. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. Owen's expression softened. "You don't need to say anything right now. Just think about it. About staying, not just until they don't need you anymore, but because this is where you belong." With that, he turned and made his way carefully down the stairs, leaving Olivia standing in the hallway, her heart full of unexpected possibility. The next morning, Olivia rose early and slipped outside, needing time alone to think. The dawn air was cool and sweet, the land around the ranch painted in soft pinks and golds as the sun crested the eastern hills. She walked to the small rise behind the house, where a single oak tree provided shade and a view of the surrounding countryside. As she sat beneath the tree, watching the day brighten around her, Olivia reflected on the changes of the past weeks. She had arrived in Presidio a fugitive, frightened and alone. Now she found herself enmeshed in the life of the Triple N, bound by growing ties of affection and obligation to Owen and his children. And Owen himself, the boy she had known, was still there, in his quiet ways and artist's eye, but now layered with the man he had become. A man who had known love and loss, who carried responsibility for many on his shoulders, and who had somehow found room in his heart for her. Did she want to stay? The question seemed simple, yet the answer was complex. Yes, she wanted to remain with the children, to watch them grow, to be a mother to them in truth as she was already becoming in practice. Yes, She felt a deepening connection to Owen, one that hovered between the familial bond they had once shared and something new, something that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch. But there was still the shadow of Victor Hawthorne. Even here, thousands of miles from St. Louis, that danger lurked in her thoughts. What if he found her? What if he brought his vengeance not just to her, but to this family she had come to love? "Thought I might find you here," a voice said, interrupting her thoughts. Owen stood a few yards away, his injured leg noticeably better as he navigated the slight incline without his cane. In the golden light of early morning, with the vastness of the Texas landscape spread behind him, he looked like he had grown from the very earth of the place, solid, enduring, essential. "It's beautiful here," Olivia said as he lowered himself carefully to sit beside her. "I can see why you never wanted to leave. It gets under your skin," Owen agreed, gazing out at the view. "Becomes part of you." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as the ranch came to life below them, smoke rising from the bunkhouse chimney, horses being led to the corral, a ranch hand heading out to check the far pastures. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," Olivia said finally. Owen turned to look at her, his expression carefully neutral. "And I want to stay," she admitted softly. "More than I've wanted anything in a long time, but I'm afraid, Owen, afraid of bringing danger to your door." He considered this, his gaze steady. "I spoke with Sheriff Harlow yesterday while you were teaching Emma her letters. He's written to contacts in the Rangers about your situation. We're not without resources here, Sophia, and Presidio is a long way from St. Louis. But if Victor is determined enough," Olivia began. "Then we'll face that together," Owen said firmly. "This is Texas. We know how to protect our own." The possessive note in his voice sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. "Our own," she echoed. Owen's gaze softened. "You're part of this family now, Sophia. The children feel it. Lucy feels it. I feel it." He paused, then added quietly, "And it's more than that, at least for me." Olivia's heart beat faster. "What do you mean?" He turned more fully toward her, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she had rarely seen. "I mean that when I look at you with Abigail, or helping James with his schoolwork, or teaching Emma to braid her hair, I see more than a stepsister or a friend. I see a woman I'm coming to care for deeply, a woman I could." He stopped, seeming to check himself. "It's too soon to speak of such things, for both of us. But I want you to know that there's a place for you here, Sophia, not just as family, but as whatever we might become to each other, given time." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes at the simple honesty of his words. "Owen," before she could continue, there was a shout from the house. They both turned to see James running toward them, waving his arms. "Pa, Miss Sophia, come quick. Sheriff Harlow's here and he says it's important." They exchanged a look of alarm before Owen struggled to his feet, wincing slightly as he put weight on his injured leg. Olivia rose quickly, offering her arm for support, which he accepted with a grateful nod. Together they made their way back to the house, where they found Sheriff Harlow waiting on the porch, his expression grave. Lucy stood nearby, her face pale, the children clustered around her with wide eyes. "Tom," Owen greeted the sheriff, his voice tense. "What brings you out so early?" Sheriff Harlow removed his hat, turning it in his hands, a gesture Olivia had come to recognize as a sign of discomfort. "Got a telegram from the Rangers," he said without preamble. "They've been looking into that matter we discussed." His eyes flicked to Olivia. "About your situation, Miss O'Connor." Olivia felt her stomach tighten with dread. "Has something happened?" The sheriff nodded slowly. "Victor Hawthorne was found dead in his St. Louis home 3 days ago. Apparent suicide, though there's some question about it." Seems he left a note confessing to various crimes, including the harassment you described and attempts on your life." Olivia stared at him, unable to process the information. "Dead," she repeated numbly. "But how? Why?" "The Rangers are still gathering information," Sheriff Harlow continued. "But it seems Hawthorne had other enemies besides yourself. He was being investigated for fraud in his business dealings, and apparently one of his associates turned evidence against him. The note mentioned nothing left to live for and sins catching up." Owen's hand found Olivia's, his fingers wrapping firmly around hers. "You're sure about this, Tom? There's no mistake." "The Rangers confirmed it with the St. Louis police," the sheriff assured them. "They'll send more details as they become available, but the main thing is—" He turned to Olivia, his expression softening. "You're safe, Miss O'Connor. The threat is over." The words should have brought immediate relief, but Olivia felt only a strange numbness. Victor Hawthorne had dominated her thoughts for so long, his malevolence driving her across the country, shaping her decisions, haunting her dreams. The sudden removal of that threat left her oddly disoriented, as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "Thank you for bringing this news," Owen said to the sheriff, his hand still holding Olivia's. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" Sheriff Harlow shook his head. "Need to get back to town. Got a stagecoach coming through today, and they've had trouble with road agents lately." He put his hat back on, tipping it to Olivia. "Congratulations on your liberation, Miss O'Connor. I expect this changes your plans somewhat." The question was innocuous, but Olivia sensed the real inquiry beneath it. Would she stay, now that she no longer needed to hide? She felt Owen's hand tighten almost imperceptibly around hers. "Some plans, perhaps," she said carefully, "but not all." The sheriff's gaze moved between them, a knowing look crossing his face. "I see," he said, a slight smile touching his lips. "Well, good day to you both." As the sheriff rode away, Lucy tactfully herded the curious children inside, leaving Owen and Olivia alone on the porch. For a long moment neither spoke. Owen still held her hand, his thumb brushing gently across her knuckles in a gesture so tender it made her throat tight. "So," he said finally, "you're free." The simplicity of the statement belied its complexity. Yes, she was free from fear, free from the need to hide, free to go anywhere, do anything. The world had suddenly opened before her, full of possibilities, including the possibility of staying. "Yes," she agreed softly. "I'm free." Owen released her hand, moving to the porch railing, his back to her as he gazed out at the ranch yard. "I meant what I said earlier, Sophia. There's a place for you here if you want it, but I understand if this news changes things. If you want to go back to St. Louis or go somewhere else entirely, I won't try to stop you." The stiff set of his shoulders belied the casualness of his words. Olivia moved to stand beside him, close enough that their arms nearly touched. "You know what Abigail asked me last night," she said quietly. "She asked me to stay forever, and I promised her I would stay as long as she needed me." Owen turned to look at her, his expression guarded. "Children often need people for a very long time," he said, echoing his words from the previous night. Olivia met his gaze steadily. "Yes, they do. And I intend to keep my promise." Something flickered in his eyes, hope, wariness, a deeper emotion she wasn't quite ready to name. "Because of the children?" he asked, his voice low. "Because of the children," Olivia confirmed. "And because of Lucy and the ranch and this place that feels more like home than anywhere I've lived since I was a child." She paused, then added softly, "And because of you, Owen." His breath caught. "Sophia." "I care for you," she continued, her heart racing but her voice steady. "Not as a stepsister, not anymore. I care for the man you've become, the father I see with your children, the rancher who built this place from nothing." I care for you in a way that frightens me a little because it's so unexpected and so complete." Owen's expression transformed, the guardedness falling away to reveal a vulnerability and hope that made him look younger, more like the boy she remembered. "I've been afraid to admit how much I want you to stay," he confessed. "Afraid of what it meant about my feelings for Eliza, afraid of rushing you, afraid of so many things." "I know," Olivia said gently. "Grief and love are complicated. They don't follow rules or timelines. But I believe there's room in your heart for the memory of Eliza and for whatever might grow between us." Owen reached for her then, his hand cupping her cheek with exquisite gentleness. "There already is something growing," he said softly. "Something I haven't felt in a long time, something I didn't think I'd ever feel again." Olivia leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly at the warmth of his palm against her skin. "Then I'll stay," she whispered. "Not just until they don't need me anymore, but until we see what this becomes." Owen's other arm came around her waist, drawing her closer. "And if it becomes something lasting?" he asked, his voice husky. "Something permanent?" Olivia met his gaze, seeing in it a future she hadn't dared imagine. "Then I'll stay for that too," she promised. His smile was like sunrise, brilliant and full of promise. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, Owen lowered his head until his lips met hers in a kiss that felt both like a beginning and a homecoming. Olivia's arms slipped around his neck as she returned the kiss, pouring into it all the feelings she had only just begun to acknowledge. When they finally parted, Owen rested his forehead against hers, his arms still holding her close. "I think," he said softly, "that they're going to need you for a very long time, the children and me." Olivia smiled, her heart full to bursting. "Then I'll stay," she whispered, "until they don't. Which I suspect will be never." From inside the house came the sound of Abigail's voice calling for Fia with increasing urgency. Owen laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Your presence is required, it seems." "Our presence," Olivia corrected, taking his hand. "Let's go in together." As they entered the house, Abigail came running to meet them, her arms outstretched. Owen scooped her up with his good arm, settling her on his hip where she could see both of them. "Fia stay?" she asked, her small face serious as she looked from her father to Olivia. Owen met Olivia's gaze over his daughter's curly head, his eyes full of love and promise. "Yes, little one," he said softly. "Miss Sophia is staying." "Forever," Abigail pressed, reaching out to touch Olivia's cheek with one small hand. Olivia covered the child's hand with her own, her heart overflowing with love for this little girl and her family, the family that was becoming her own. "Forever," she confirmed, her eyes never leaving Owen's. "I promise." 2 years later, Olivia sat on the porch of the Triple N, rocking gently as she nursed her infant son. The ranch had changed in subtle ways since she had first arrived: new curtains in the windows, a garden flourishing behind the house, a fresh coat of paint on the barn. But the most significant changes were less visible. The laughter that filled the rooms, the sense of completeness that had returned to the household, the love that bound them all together. Owen emerged from the barn, James at his side. At 10, James was growing tall, already showing signs of the man he would become: thoughtful, responsible, with his father's steady nature and artistic eye. They were deep in conversation, Owen's hand resting on his son's shoulder as they discussed the new foal that had been born the previous night. Emma, now 7 and flourishing in school, sat on the porch steps, painstakingly copying letters into a small notebook. Her blonde hair was plaited into a single braid, secured with the blue ribbon Olivia had bought for her in town 2 years earlier. She looked up as her father and brother approached, eager to share her progress. And Abigail, now a spirited 7-year-old with wild curls and a penchant for climbing trees, came racing from the creek, her dress hem wet, a bouquet of wildflowers clutched in her small fist. "Mama," she called, her voice bright with excitement. "I found flowers for the table just like you wanted." Olivia's heart swelled at the word Mama, a title she had earned gradually, first from Abigail, then Emma, and finally, solemnly, from James on the day she and Owen were married. It was a responsibility and a privilege she cherished beyond measure. "They're beautiful, Abby," she praised as the child bounded onto the porch. "Perfect for the dinner table. Why don't you take them to Lucy? She'll help you put them in water." As Abigail dashed inside, Owen climbed the porch steps, bending to kiss Olivia's forehead and then gazing down at their son, who was now sleeping peacefully at her breast. "How's little Thomas doing?" he asked softly, his finger gently stroking the infant's cheek. "Perfect," Olivia assured him. "Just perfect." Owen settled into the chair beside her, his hand finding hers as they rocked side by side, watching Emma write and James lead his pony to the barn. The late afternoon sun gilded the landscape, the familiar view of hills and creek and distant mountains that had become home. "Happy?" Owen asked quietly, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. Olivia turned to look at him, at the face she had come to know as well as her own, the face that still made her heart skip when he smiled at her that certain way. The boy she had known was still there, in the curve of his mouth, the warmth of his eyes. But it was the man she had fallen in love with, the father, the husband, the partner who had helped her build this life. "Completely," she answered, and it was true. The journey that had brought her to the Triple N had been marked by fear and loss, but it had led her to a joy more profound than she could have imagined. "Are you?" Owen's smile was answer enough, but he leaned closer, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that still held the power to make her pulse race. "More than I ever thought possible," he murmured against her mouth. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ranch yard, Olivia thought back to that moment on the porch 2 years earlier, when Owen had told her how the children missed their mother's touch. She had promised to stay until they didn't need her anymore, never imagining that their need would become mutual, or that it would transform into something far deeper and more enduring. Abigail reappeared on the porch, proudly informing them that her flowers were now in the prettiest vase on the table. She climbed into Owen's lap, nestling against his chest as she had done as a smaller child, though now her legs dangled nearly to the floor. "Tell the story, Mama," she requested, her eyes bright, "about how you came to stay with us." It was a favorite bedtime tale, one the children never seemed to tire of hearing. Olivia exchanged a smile with Owen over Abigail's curly head. "Well," she began, shifting the sleeping baby in her arms, "once upon a time, there was a woman who traveled a very long way to find a home." As she recounted, the story softened and simplified for young ears. Olivia watched the faces of her family. Owen's gentle smile, Abigail's rapt attention, Emma's quiet contentment as she abandoned her writing to listen, James's pretended disinterest that couldn't quite hide his enjoyment of the familiar tale. "And then," Olivia continued, reaching the part the children loved best, "the cowboy said they miss her touch, and the woman answered, 'Then I'll stay till they don't.' But they never stopped needing her," Abigail interjected, as she always did at this point in the story. "That's right," Owen confirmed, his eyes meeting Olivia's over their daughter's head, full of love and promise. "And she kept her word. She stayed forever. And they all lived happily ever after," Abigail finished with satisfaction. "Yes," Olivia agreed softly, her heart full to bursting as she looked at the family they had built together, a family born of loss and courage, of promises kept and love that had grown in unexpected soil. They certainly did.